Out of all the exotics in Destiny history, there have always been a handful of gems within the yellow engram pool. They're a lot like diamonds in the rough, or needles in a haystack, if you will. They work so well with specific elements and subclasses, it almost feels as if they might be just a little too good, honestly. Take Celestial Nighthawk, for example. It turns Tri-Shot Golden Gun into a single round, combining the damage from all 3 rounds into a single bone-shattering bullet. Tractor Cannon can even buff it, make it even stronger, hit even harder. Anyone on the receiving end of that gets a generational scar so deep that their ancestors won't even come near you. That's some hellish damage right there. Other good examples are Lucky Raspberry or Shards of Galanor, maybe even Liar's Handshake. All of these I've talked about a lot on this channel. Pre-Fun Police, of course. Back in the day, and by that I mean only a few seasons ago, Liar's Handshake was one of the highest DPS melee exotics you could get your grubby little hands on. It even used to work outside of arc trees. While you couldn't necessarily proc it with a melee attack, the buff would start if someone slapped you. That was a bug, of course, but still, it was awesome. I mean, of course they fixed it, because why would they let us have any fun, right? One of my personal favorites has always been Orpheus Rig, among a few others that we'll talk about here in just a little bit. Mostly because it is one of the few exotics in the game that really emphasizes on dual functionality on a subclass level. That's why I have such a strong affinity towards it and Void as an element in general. It's just kinda cool. There are very few exotics that are like Orpheus Rig. I'll go a bit more in depth on that just here in a second. But for now, the main point that I'm trying to make here is that there are a plethora of exotics to choose from, but only a small few are really worth something. Let's take a look at the Nightstalker skill trees just for a second. When I do anything with my Nightstalker on light side, I always stick to top tree, for reasons, I may add, but you can makeshift something pretty cool together on bottom tree as well. You can see that I've got a Gambler's Dodge, a Void Wall Grenade, and a Triple Jump. Nothing too fancy, but it's the skill tree that makes all the difference here. We've got 4 base abilities. Top tree starts with Keen Scout. It lets you run a little faster and makes radar better while marking tethered enemies. Snare Bomb sticks to any surface, just about, including faces sometimes, and disorients targets when it blows up, which slows them down. It's great for setting bullshit traps in PvP. Other than that, it's mostly just kind of a PvE thing. And then we've got Deadfall, the one that matters here. Void anchors become traps with increased range and duration. That's why Orpheus Rig is so popular on top tree. And lastly, we've got Vanishing Step. It makes you turn invisible for a few seconds when you dodge, and honestly, that's really all it does for you. On the bottom tree, however, we've got something a little different. Lockdown, which doubles grenade effects and durations. Vanish and Smoke, which lets your smoke bomb turn you invisible and buffs your primary stats. Combat Provision converts grenade damage into dodge energy, and making anybody invisible, including yourself, returns little bits of grenade energy. It's pretty handy. And lastly, we've got Mobius Quiver. This lets you fire Shadow Shot multiple times for high damage. Nice against boss targets, just as good against multiple crowds of mobs and high instance encounters. The tethers work as traps on both bottom and top tree. That right off the bat is pretty cool, but it's how Orpheus Rig boosts it that really makes it worth it. Now, I know all of this is just common knowledge by this point, but there are also lots of new players in the game right now. That's why we went over skill trees in the beginning, and I tend to see a lot of those new players kind of asking the same question. I'm a Nightstalker. What exotic do I need to be using? Well, you got a couple to choose from. We're going to take a look at the Orpheus Rig, Graviton Forfeit, and Assassin's Cowl for all you Invis crazies out there. And for the record, no, this is not one of those which exotic is the best type of things. I don't do that on this channel. I always get yelled at in the comments a day later. So, without further stalling for time due to YouTube monetization policies, let's take a look at some template builds based around a few exotics that were designed with the Nightstalker in mind. All of these are easy to assemble and use on a practical level, so anybody should be able to pick up the game and toy around with these to their heart's content. We'll start with the Orpheus Rig. Right now, I'm on bottom tree. The way I have everything set up gears my stats towards high mobility, intellect, and strength with mid-tier recovery. In my personal opinion, this is a pretty optimal stat build, mostly because it allows me to take advantage of Shadow Shot a little bit more often. The high intellect keeps my cooldown to 4 minutes and 7 seconds, and high strength keeps the smoke bomb charged, meaning I can essentially disappear in PvE environments whenever the fuck I feel like it. This build template is not fancy by any means, but that's why it's a template. It's just an example, so don't shit on me in the comments about how weak this is, because yeah, I already know. Orpheus Rig only really comes into play when you're casting. It'll buff your supercharge, so that shouldn't really be a surprise. It allows for additional damage from your cast by increasing the amount of arrows that can be fired. If your base armor stats allow for high intellect, you can take advantage of Orpheus on either top or bottom tree. The super will remain the same, except for the fact that one is an attack super with invisibility, and the other is a support super with high super regeneration, which we're going to talk about about right now. Everybody knows this build. You pair Top Tree and Orpheus Rig together to maximize your super regen. You can give that an extreme buff by slotting Energy Converter and a few charged mods as well. As long as you throw a grenade before you cast, it'll almost always fill you back up. But there isn't really a lot of strategy to this one. The exotic itself is kind of the strategy, so needless to say, these are the only two places that Orpheus Rig is really going to shine. When you're building your armor, whether or not you intend on damage casting or support casting, that is the question that you need to be asking yourself. Single tether is a really good damage control option in the event of mob clusters, especially with the ability regeneration from each target tethered. If you're new to the game and you have a hard-on for turning invisible, this is a really good starter build for you to work your way up the power chain with. It's easy to use, easy to assemble, and for anyone new to the premise of Destiny, being invisible in high instances is actually a good thing, especially given the handling buff. Give it the right exotic gun and you'll be set, just like me. Preferably less miserable when playing the game. Now we're going to take a quick look at Graviton Forfeit. It's a relatively overlooked exotic because it can't really maximize damage or do anything real fancy. All it does is just increase the duration of invisibility, and we all know that that is effectively worthless in PvP, at least in my own miserable experiences. However, that can be taken advantage of in PvE. Here's my stat line. High mobility, high strength. Mods like Powerful Friends and Radiant Light are absolute must-haves. These can be acquired from the gunsmith in the tower on a random rotation. See, enemies are straight stupid, and even though you are clearly visible when you're invisible, pardon my air quotes, they won't be able to see you every time you throw that smoke bomb. Turning invisible buffs your primary stats like handling / reload speed and an assortment of other substats. Guns in general are extremely potent when you have a ×3 modifier to your base weapon stats. The faster you can ready them, aim them, and reload them, the higher overall DPS you're going to be pushing. All of this comes from the mobility stat. The more mobility you have, the faster the Hunter's class ability is going to cool down. Having mods like Perpetuation or Distribution on your cloak are going to buff that even more. Keep in mind, Graviton is only buffing your invisibility. It's not making Heart of the Pack any more effective, and it isn't going to make it last any longer either. This is only for increased invisibility. We could take a look at Assassin's Cowl just for a moment. That'll change things up a bit. Assassin's Cowl is pretty straightforward. Although it wasn't necessarily built for the Nightstalker, it does pair really well with the invisibility. When you get a powered melee kill or you use a finisher on an enemy, you turn invisible. Based on what you killed, this effect will be longer or shorter, so in smooth brain terms, the stronger the enemy, the longer the buff. The goal here with this one is to aim for finishers, since melee final blows aren't really going to be happening with the support melee attack. The smoke bomb will turn you invisible, and with 80 mobility, you'll have another dodge charge roughly every 16 seconds or so, and that's about 4 seconds before Heart of the Pack expires, meaning well-timed abilities and finishers can keep that invisibility chain going, in theory, indefinitely. Now again, this is a template. This is more of an experiment than anything else, but it is fun to play around with. In order to optimize it though, you'll need a very specific mod. It's called Reactive Pulse. This is an arc mod that slots for 3 energy, and you can get it from Banshee, again on a random rotation. It has 2 abilities. The first one emits a shockwave of arc energy when you take damage while surrounded by targets at the cost of a single charge of light. The second perk is passive and is always active. It gives an overshield while finishing targets, which is perfect for what we're trying to do here. Now, that second perk is only going to be active if you have another arc combat style mod anywhere on your armor, or if another arc mod is slotted next to Reactive Pulse itself. At the end of the day, it'll basically just let you be invisible for as long as you want. End of story. It's fun to dick around with. Finishers will turn you invisible, smoke bombs will turn you invisible, everything's going to turn you invisible. It's great. Not super viable for anything endgame related, but it is still a blast. And honestly, it's as simple as that. Cowl is a nifty little exotic that doesn't fit real well into endgame builds, but it does have value with starter builds or power grinding. But regardless, these are my thoughts on 3 of what I feel like are some of the most efficient and overlooked leveling exotics for new players who are trying to get a handle on the game itself. One of the things I like to do on this channel is really experiment and toy around with exotics that you don't frequently see out in any instance or in the shared world. I mean, the entire game is about building your character, so just take this information and do with it what you will. For any of you new guys out there, feel free to yell at me in the comments if you think I missed something or if you just want to tell me that I suck. Returning subs, you know the drill. New guys, I will be in my cell if anybody needs me.